Hello, I'm Danny Proper, and I interviewed a Mormon the other day. I'm not entirely sure why, although, yeah, there is a reason. So we're here to kind of investigate how a religion like Mormonism, it's known for its like strict rules and stuff, how that intercepts with like something like wrestling, which isn't always the most family friendly. I mean, it can be. It is a lot of the time. I mean, most of what I do is like pretty family friendly. You can take your kids, have no issues. I didn't really know anything about it coming in. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't do my research. I didn't have time. I'm a busy man. You know what I mean? I've not even seen the musical, to be honest. All I've seen is that one episode of South Park years ago. So I've got about 20 minutes worth of knowledge as far as I'm concerned. So I've learned that, you're not allowed to smoke, drink, take drugs. It's all a bit, you know what I mean? But I've just learned you can't have long hair either, apparently, which I didn't know. I'm not entirely sure why. So we're trying to find out basically how that mindset looks at something like wrestling. To be honest, I felt a bit nervous going into the interview because I didn't have a clue what to expect. Again, I'm kind of underprepared. It's like going into a job interview. You can probably see on the footage, I sat up straight, like, oh, hello, sir, how are you? And trying hard to like not offend anyone, because I've got no beef with this church, you know what I mean? I don't have a clue what they're about, good or bad. So Peter, I'd never heard of him before this, but he's quite well known. He's got some clout, as the kids say, in the Mormon community. He's got quite a big podcast called the Mormon Civil War. He's famous for being excommunicated, for being outspoken kind of against certain things the church has done. So what's his beef with the church, if any?
Right, okay. So how are you doing? You good?
I'm well, thank you. Really nice to meet you. This is going to be one of the weirdest and most interesting
Yeah.
conversations of my life, I think. So I'm really chuffed to be involved.
So I think Peter was just as baffled as me as to what this is all about. What's the point of all this, basically? But he seemed game.
So tell me about yourself, Danny.
So my name's Danny. I'm a wrestler, based in the UK. It's not my full-time job, but it's one of life's weird little passions, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm all about the crazy passions.
Yeah.
So mine is Mormonism. So I'm excommunicated but still attending member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, usually known as the Mormons.
The week we did the interview just coincidentally happened to be quite a newsworthy week.
Our president, who was 101, has died. We've got a general conference that happens twice a year coming up next week, so they're all scuffling to get ready for that. We've had awful tragedies that Charlie Kirk, this sort of right-wing podcaster person, and in America was shot in Utah, which is sort of a Mormon bastion, by at least an inactive member of the church called Tyler Robinson. And we've just had an awful situation where a guy called Jake Sanford attacked a Mormon congregation at worship, shot 4 people, set fire to the building. So somehow our religion keeps managing to be in the news at crazy times. We also started the American Gold Rush. Apparently, Mormons were there doing that. So we're used to kind of being a tiny, weird, obscure religion that keeps getting into the headlines for various reasons. So I'm a podcaster who kind of comments on all of that and the tensions within the church and suggesting reforms and things.
I had to ask him about being a missionary because I think that's the first thing you think of, isn't it? When you think of Mormons, you think about them going door to door in the white shirts.
Did you ever do like the knocking door to door and things like that?
Yes, I did. I was actually, is this, young people are encouraged to serve missions. Used to be mostly the boys, but now a lot of women are serving as well. And usually you'd serve a 2-year mission and you don't choose where you go. So it could be anywhere in the world. I was praying it wasn't Leeds and I got my prayer answered. So I ended up in the deep south in the United States. So I was in the Florida Tallahassee mission, which had like North Florida and South Alabama. And at the time, a county each of Mississippi and Georgia, just to make it like really, really deep south. And that was mad. That was going into a completely different world. It was still like apartheid, really. And this was in 1989 to 91. So still kind of living with the aftermath of the civil rights movement, very segregated neighborhoods, but racially integrated schools. The churches were mostly different races. You had your white Baptist church and your black Baptist church. So even though my church has got a terrible history of racism, really, and segregation, and not allowing black people to have the priesthood in it until 1978, ironically, I was in a community where it was the Mormons and other tiny groups like the Catholics, who are a minority there, and Seventh-day Adventists, who actually had integrated congregations. So that was weird. Kind of be the goodies about race for once. And it was just an amazing experience, but of a completely different culture, very much kind of macho around hunting and trucks and farming and all of that stuff, which was a different world from little middle class artist me. Yeah, but really cool experience. It gave me a lot more confidence, helped me to kind of have a larger view of the world.
So Peter's got quite a unique story within the church. So I wanted to find out a bit more about his journey.
So, how did you get into Mormonism then? Were you brought up in it, or were you?
Yes, I was. So we have a very assertive missionary program. We have like tens of thousands of missionaries serving around the world at any given point, which for a small church is probably larger than most others deploy. Um, the attrition rate tends to be really bad these days. Like around 90% of people who are converted and baptized are not participating anymore within a year or two. So we have a very small retention percentage, but we work hard for it. But if you're raised in the church, it really is your world. There's a lot of, it's just your normal. So my great grandmother actually joined the church. She was the first in our family in the 1920s. And so all of her descendants have been members. My mum was a convert. My parents went to the church's university called Brigham Young University in Utah, and that's where they met and got married. They had me and then came back. So I'm a dual citizen. I've got American passport and a British one. And then just growing up in the church, tiny little congregations, starting to grow bigger and get better youth programs just in time for my age group. So I had a really intense, wonderful, immersive life in a very close-knit community. Lots of really cool social stuff going on, quite healthy because we don't smoke or drink and things like that. So my friends at school would be describing how hammered they got and the stupid things they did while drunk at the weekend. And I'd be like, I had a great time. We went dancing, we had social, I talked to loads of people, and I didn't wake up with a hangover. Like, why are you doing this to yourselves? It always felt kind of this disconnection from the world everyone else was living in, where social life revolved around the pub and getting off your face on things. And it just looked so awful, and it was, we were having a lot more fun than they were. But I think with any close-knit community, particularly a religious one, it can have a cost as well. That if you don't quite fit in, it's really difficult, and you come under a lot of stress and pressure. And so it's always give and take. I think in what is quite a helpful term, high demand fundamentalist religion. So a community and a religion that expects a lot of you, like it's immersive. You're not just doing it on a Sunday. So yeah, so I had a really good upbringing, but in a sense, it taught me to really care about a lot of core values. And when I found out the leadership of the church were not living up to those, or where the church culture was actually becoming the baddies, what the scriptures say you shouldn't be doing, and they're making that a virtue, that became a big problem. And like many other people, I've kind of started speaking out against that drift, as it were, and how we could make things better in the church if we want to survive, because it takes a toll. Our membership is starting to crash now. They're booming a bit in Africa, but in the rest of the world, the congregations are starting to shrink on the whole in most places. So we're a bit of an endangered species now.
I was quite surprised to learn just how fundamentalist the church was, but I think I was even more surprised to learn that his son was a big fan of wrestling during the Attitude Era, of all things.
How was that for you, like watching your son watch that as a Mormon?
Oh, I was totally, it was horrific. He was also into an Eminem, which was another, like, again, if I'd have handled that differently in retrospect. But you could absolutely see how much he wanted to identify with like a powerful sort of superhero alter ego, um, to look up to. And whether that's in sort of aggressive rappers or if it's in pro wrestling and that sort of thing. So that was really interesting to watch and to worry about as a parent. Like, is he just going to become a meathead thug? He had his moments, but he got over it. Bless him. He's a good guy. And so, you can absolutely see how, certainly from a religious point of view, where technically you're not really meant to be into violence and showing off an ego. The kind of the culture and the ethos in wrestling is, on in the face of it, is really not Christian at all. Because it's not humble. The ideals in Christianity are usually humility, service, being kind to people, not breaking them. Don't fight, try and be a peacemaker. So the whole thing of it is feels like the complete opposite of all of that.
Pete showed a big interest in wrestling, bigger than I expected, to the point where when he was asking me questions, I think I was even less prepared about that than I was about the Mormon stuff.
Was there kind of it's almost like, this is not true, children, but adults say this, finding out that Santa Claus isn't real. Did you have a sort of a transition point? How much, when you were younger, did you just believe it was all real? And when did you sort of segue into understanding it was choreographed or theatrical?
I had no interest whatsoever when I thought it. Like, I'd just seen it in passing, and it was just kind of like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's a bit like boxing, but you can do whatever you want. Basically, what we know MMA to be now. I was like, all right, whatever, but it's not like Power Rangers, though, is it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I think there was a cage match on. I was just walking through. My cousin was watching it. I was like, well, why are they in a cage? What's going on here? He says something like, well, the way to win, you've got to climb out of the cage, and you've got to stop the other guy climbing out of the cage. It's like, well, what do you mean? Like, they'll if they knock them off, they'll die. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know how old. I'm probably about 7 or 8 or something. And then I remember my cousin and my dad just turning to me and just going, well, you know it's fake, don't you? And I was like, yeah, obviously. But inside I was like, oh, I get it now. Oh, right, okay, this is cool. Right, oh, so it is like Power Rangers. It is. Yeah. Right, okay. I want to see some more of this.
That's really interesting, because I haven't. It's only recently I've kind of clocked how, in a sense, theatrical it is. And I'm I teach arts. I've also taught drama and music and things like that, and we do lots of collaborations with the arts and performing arts in our schools. And to sort of realize, in a sense, the guys who go into the wrestling are not like hard-bitten sports people necessarily. They've got much more going on. They want to tell a story. They want to be a character. And that brings in so many more ingredients and dimensions. And even while knowing it's not real, everyone knows it's not real, that I still can't, because I'm from a kind of very intense fundamentalist religious background. For me, truth really matters. Like, it has to be real, or it's a fantasy story, but it's not important. I can enjoy Harry Potter, but it's not my world. But if I'm reading scriptures, or I'm hearing the stories of characters in those scriptures or in your church's history, that's real stuff. This is like the real thing. In a way, it's after the same buzz, that there's something supernatural and amazing and extraordinary going on in the world, that we all are children of God. We've got this potential. I mean, one of the unique selling points with Mormonism is we have a strong doctrine of the idea that God is really parental, so wants children to grow up to become like God, to be gods, not just be like a passive choir praising him for eternity like some weird sadist, but that actually the purpose and the point is to train and educate people, and to the point where they know everything a God does, and you can go off and create your own worlds. And that's wow. Again, there's no limit to that. It's quite a similar narrative to what you're talking about. Anything is possible. and your life can be all kinds of things if you want it to be.
A lot of people use the word Mormons. I'm going to assume this is going to be the title of the video, but apparently lately it's become something of a dirty word.
I keep using the word Mormon as well.
Yes,
but is that the right term, or is there a?
It used to be. Now you're a very naughty boy. You stop persecuting me.
Right.
The name of the church went through a few different versions in the early days. It was started in the early 1800s by a young man called Joseph Smith, who claimed to have had a vision when he was about 14 or 15, seeing God and Jesus, who told him not to join any of the other churches and kind of calling him to be a prophet. And then a few years later, he got visited by an angel called Moroni, who said, there's a book of scripture buried near you. Me and my dad wrote it. It was written on gold plates hundreds of years ago, and it's been buried near where you live. And you're being called by God to dig it out and translate it. And his dad was called Mormon, and Mormon was kind of the editor of this record, which claims to be of groups of Israelites who went from the Middle East to the American continent, became some of the ancestors of the native people there, and carried on doing the Jewish and then Christian thing, and that Jesus visited them after doing his life in Israel. And they recorded it all in about 1,000 years worth of scripture from 600 BC to about 400 AD. Although we've got this really inconveniently long name, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we're in the last days, Jesus is coming back soon. Mormon is a far more useful nickname. So it's been on a journey. The church pretty quickly embraced it very positively and was mostly all right with being called Mormons, although sometimes correct people with the name of the church. But the president of the church who just died, Russell Nelson, after the previous two prophet presidents before him, kind of engaged in a really positive PR campaign called I'm a Mormon. So lots of members sort of selling the idea of church members being diverse, having lots of different backgrounds. Some of them are kickboxers, some of them are scholars, and artists. But with the tagline, I'm a Mormon, just being very proud of it, owning it, come and find out, we're fun. But as soon as Russell Nelson became president, he'd always hated this, and he'd kind of been slapped down for opposing it earlier on. He was like, I'm in charge now, we're not doing that anymore. That was a victory for Satan. At which point a lot of us were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're saying this. You've just broke the rule. Because even if you don't agree with the previous prophets, you're meant to be in harmony with them. You can't say they were wrong. That's just not what we do. And from then on, he shamed everyone out of using the term. He rebranded. Even our kind of internationally famous to some choir, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, which does a kind of weekly radio and TV show in America every Sunday, which has been going on forever. He had them renamed the choir, the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, which is bonkers and destroyed the brand and doesn't even have the name of Jesus in, which was kind of meant to be the point. So at the moment, Mormons are being told, if anyone calls you Mormon, you correct them, you sort out the name. And we get very upset if people in the media are using the wrong name of the church or trying to shorten it. So there's a whole journey going on with name and branding around that term. But ultimately, people usually quickly revert to Mormon because we know what we mean by that. And Mormonism as a religious journey isn't just our church. There are smaller but lots of break-off groups and churches that have the same roots, and they are all part of Mormonism. So it's quite a useful generic term for the whole family of ideas and the history of it and so on. So that's where we're at with the name. It's a massive distraction from actually being useful to the world. It's like we'll just be uptight about our name now. But he died last week, so we'll see how long that lasts.
As odd and confusing as the premise for all this is, we did find a lot of common ground. Pouring your entire life into this kind of like niche, insular subculture affects your day to day, and like alienation from, say, your peers in like a normal office job or whatever. And not to say we're comparing like religious persecution with liking wrestling, but there's definitely some common themes running through.
And it was very difficult as a child. It was shameful. It's the weird Mormons, the cults, we like Jehovah's Witnesses, these small groups that are often quite dysfunctional, but also not trusted by mainstream society or Christianity, particularly. We're all heretics. We're apostates. Meanwhile, we think they're all apostate and heretics. So it's we give as good as we get. So it's quite, a name like that can be quite a burden to carry, with a lot of embarrassment and shame and guilt and worry.
It's there's a lot of similarities in, like you go on a mission, you're knocking door to door. So we do that. When you're training to be a wrestler, you'll help out like the local promotions and things. You'll kind of go around shops and ask to put up posters in the windows and things.
Interesting. Yeah, so you become part of them, sharing the faith, marketing it and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And to the point where sometimes when you'll get knocked back so badly, you'll be like, what was that guy's problem? Like, all I'm saying is, excuse me, mate, can I put this poster in your window?
We're harmless. We're not dangerous. Why are you treating us like we are? Yeah.
Again, it's like I said, the two extremes. So if you go in like a really posh area, in like you say like a high-end salon, you pop your head in, excuse me, advertising for a wrestling show, put the poster, and they'd be like, oh dear, no, oh no, get that filth away. But then say you go into like a rough pub, like a working men's club or something, can I put this wrestling poster up? They'd be like, oh, it's not fake shit. So there's like no middle ground. People are hating on it for completely opposite reasons at the same time. It doesn't quite make sense. Yeah. So I don't know if you felt the same, like say getting knocked back and things like that. Does that make your connection to the church stronger then?
Yes, I mean, there's nothing that helps religious fervor like persecution, and feeling that, because I think perhaps something we both experienced then is, while being seen as the weird outsiders, we're actually the proper rebels. You're the punk. So and sometimes by doing the thing that's less dangerous, in Britain where it's mostly secular, by choosing to be religious, you're actually quite a rebel because you are not going along with the crowd. You have to, and also you have to have a real personal commitment to it. Obviously, you can have family pressure and so on, but we often compare ourselves here in Britain as Mormons with people who live in Utah, where certainly in the past, more than half the population was Mormon in the whole state, and in Idaho, and this whole zone of Mormon HQ in the Midwest in America. Is it the Midwest or the West? I can't work out what they call what, but and there it's like being in the Church of England. It's just what everyone does, and there's no cost to it. In fact, it's quite socially advantageous to be Mormon in those situations, and a lot of people have to fake it to hold down their jobs. But here, where you're a small misunderstood minority, you have to really believe it or you drop out. So that toughens you up. You become more fervent. You become quite independent minded. You get used to going against the flow and not being mainstream. And that's really exciting. That's actually quite brave. That's punk. That is being the real rebel, not the people who think they're being rebellious, but they're all doing exactly the same thing from our point of view, like with the booze and the shagging and the whatever, it's like you think you're so whatever. Most of you are doing that. It's not special. How about not getting drunk all the time? That's a bit weird, isn't it? That's different. And that was kind of our mindset of it. Just reaffirms your commitments if it works that way for you. So it can certainly have persecution has a major backfire effect. It toughens people up. It makes communities more intense and fervent, and you go with the narrative, well, this must be good, or they won't be persecuting us for it. We're here to change the world, and they don't want that to happen.
So how do you love something so much, enough to inspire change in it, but then through that be forced to leave?
I just wanted to delve a little bit deeper into the excommunication. So was it one specific incident that
No,
that.
so you can be excommunicated for properly evil stuff, like really bad child abuse or committing adultery, things like that. But there's a category of apostasy. So to meet those criteria, you have to publicly kind of oppose or criticize the church, and the list is kind of its doctrines, its leaders, and then they added its policies, which means you can't criticize anything whatsoever, even something that isn't as important as a doctrine, just the way things are being done. They're so paranoid now. And if you're doing that, it's your sort of regional leader, your stake president is obliged to address that and intervene. So I had some meetings with mine. I was starting to make lots of quite long critical posts on Facebook, and that evolved into a podcast that was audio at first and then became video on YouTube. And my stake president was really tried to do due diligence. He had long conversations with me. He was very, open, keen to understand. Um, I think in retrospect, I just kept waffling, and I should have asked him a few more questions to get him really like being accountable for things rather than just me hanging myself by waffling on with everything I was freaked out about. But ultimately, I was given a warning, like, church discipline will become necessary unless you take down all of your stuff, all the critical stuff. And he knew I wasn't going to do that, but there was that moment where I had that final opportunity to avoid it. And after that, we're going ahead with what's called a membership council now. So I actually had a good hearing. I had an opportunity. I had 40 minutes to kind of speak my case. The stake president, was saying what his concerns were and whatever. And then it was Q&A. Everyone there was allowed to ask me questions, and a lot of them were acquaintances and friends of mine. And most of them are actually really kind and positive. They were like, yeah, I've listened to your podcast. I quite agree with a lot of what you're saying. We can see that you're coming from a place of loving Christ and wanting things to be good. But ultimately, then the decision was still made to excommunicate me. I then had an opportunity for appeal to the first presidency of the church. So that's the president and his two counselors who run the global church. So I kind of I may have written 26 pages in my appeal against my excommunication and sent that to them, which is one of my episodes now. And they upheld the excommunication. So it just was, you're gone. The process to go back I'd have to do a lot of groveling. I'd have to really be vetted by quite senior people to be allowed to be rebaptized and back in. So that's not going to happen. I'll wait for them to apologize. And so at the moment, my goal is to be really stubborn, to be one of the last 12 people still attending my dying church, so I inherit the billions. So I intend to out-stubborn them. But it can have a lot of implications. It can mean that you're less trusted, that, my family have been lovely. Mostly it's not been a problem. But you do get subtle shunning. They're very keen that their children aren't kind of around me unsupervised in case I say something that damages their testimony. There's that, and you stop being invited to certain things that used to just be in the in crowd. And in a way, that's quite healthy because you realize how cliquey people in your church can be and how much they do exclude anyone else or people who don't seem completely kosher. And that's important to be aware of. If you're going to be healthy, you need to know that that's not good. It doesn't help. But I think because other people have been excommunicated and been through it, shared their whole journey in social media over the last few years, that totally empowered me. I knew what to expect. I knew what it was going to feel like because I kind of lived it through it with those friends. And it meant that I was able to kind of take more control of the situation. So I pro wrestled it. I took a bonkers hat with a big A and a question mark on it for apostasy with feathers in. So I went with the costume to my trial. So I've learned a thing or two from the wrestlers and kind of made it a bit more fun and took control of that farcical situation.
So with you being told so public about it and everything, did that get you any like backlash from your fellow church members, or did that game them?
Well, the wonderful thing about Mormons is they are just spectacularly nice. When they're not shooting people, they're the nicest people you will ever meet, and really passive aggressive. We do not do conflict very well. They'd rather walk on glass than have a massive row. So usually people leave you alone or they're scared. I think they're quite intimidated because they know I'm very knowledgeable and I know my stuff and I've been there and done everything. So I could probably out argue them on most points. So I think mostly they're a bit scared to even try giving me grief about something. And very graciously in Sunday school lessons and discussions at church, the teacher who does most of them at the moment in our congregation, he's really generous. He often asks, "What's your opinion, Peter?" Or he respects me as someone who knows the stuff. And I'm very happy to participate and contribute what I can. So there's respect for that knowledge that I have, which is really kind. They don't have to do that. And ultimately, if you've got friends and family and backup and a community that gets you, that gives you the confidence to kind of weather the storms that come with it all. And yeah, so I feel like I'm in a good place. It's been mostly very positive. And there is a war going on of ideas. There are podcasters who are defending the church and they're the critics, and we all go at each other and we hate watch each other's stuff and do all the social media thing. And it can be a bit performative, but we all ultimately mostly really want the best for each other. We don't want each other to die. We're trying to persuade, and ultimately we'll all know we're arguing about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin in a really tiny religion that is no one else understands. So there's certainly intense debate and discussion now that social media has facilitated that in a way that is impossible to have it in the live church community. It's totally suppressed there. You can't discuss anything really if it gets at all intense. So that's wonderful. It's been actually a really healthy psychological outlet for the whole Mormon community to actually start having these difficult conversations and to do it by proxy through the podcasters. And it has led to major reforms, by having these conversations, by highlighting the issues, by publicizing the truth about things the church has been hiding. It has been forced by that scrutiny from the critics supported by journalists and other people, to make significant reforms in child safeguarding. That's happened in Britain and was something we were very much focused on, in starting to spend more of its money on humanitarian aid and at least talk about it, and acknowledge that they have these fortunes. So they, to start changing their language about women and their roles and things like that. So it's worked. I wouldn't be bothering if there was no hope of being part of an advocacy campaign working. It has worked. It's brought about significant reforms in the church, but it's painfully slow and the leadership really don't like doing it. They're always the last to come round to it. So we've made life a lot better for a lot of people in the church, and that's ultimately our goal. Is if it's going to carry on, it needs to be healthier and do less harm. And I think we've created a much safer space for being more nuanced, for being less fundamentalist and single-minded, and to be more reassured if you're thinking for yourself. So I think that's been a really virtuous journey that's happened because of taking people like myself doing this and speaking up publicly.
I've learned a lot. Can wrestling and Mormonism mix? I'd say don't see why not. Pete's a nice bloke. I appreciate his time for getting involved in this nonsense, essentially. Yeah, if all Mormons are like him, then sound by me.
Danny, what a cool conversation. Thank you so much for sharing that world with me. And it's been a really privilege to meet you.
Eye-opening. You'll have to come down to a show soon and see what.
I'd love to. Yeah, you've converted me.
Right, so you can follow me at properdm_. because some psychopath had already taken proper DM for some reason. On Instagram, Twitter, whatever else, I don't know. Bebo, Vinted, PSN, Xbox Live. Bye.